Well, I'd like to start off by thanking the organizers for what's been a really great conference and congratulate everyone for making it to the morning of the last day, which is always a challenge. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project I've been involved with since about March last year, which has really been focused on trying to take the public DESI data that was released last March and essentially trying to do a completely independent, unofficial, not DESI sanctioned catalog to cosmology reanalysis. So this is all work done really in collaboration with Anton Judekin. He's a really incredible postdoc in Geneva, as well as Misha Ivanov. And recently, we've had some additional friends join in as well, particularly Stephen Chen, Mark Mouse, and Jamie Sullivan. And I really should say thanks in particular to the DESI collaboration for making this data public. We've been having a lot of fun with it, and it's really made possible by all their efforts actually, well, first producing the data and producing it in a way that's kind of accessible to the community. So all the papers are sort of linked there. Really, the point of this talk is to encourage you to open the papers. So I'm going to kind of give you a little outline of really the whole project and a couple of challenges and results we found out along the way. So essentially, the whole thing we're trying to do is turn this map of DESI galaxies into a set of cosmological parameters. And before I did cosmology, I thought that you'd start off with a nice, beautiful map of galaxies like that, and then you could do something. Turns out the actual DESI dataset looks slightly more like this. This is the DESI LRGs, I think. It's just a table of 10 million numbers, which means doing this analysis, actually going from this table of numbers to cosmology, is actually quite difficult. So yeah, this is kind of a challenging problem. So the DESI data release 1 contained a table of 10 million numbers containing the galaxy positions, redshifts, and weights. It also contained tables for randomly unclustered particles telling you about the selection function, but that was it. There was no simulations, at least at the time we started. There was no power spectra, there were no covariance matrices, mocks, windows, anything fun like that. Which means if you want to redo it, you have to get every single one of these constraints by hand, and you have to measure everything from scratch. So that was a pretty formidable challenge and kept us quiet for about 9 months. I should say it's kind of an important challenge. I think it's great that we have the ability to do community reanalyses of a whole bunch of different data sets, both sort of to independently verify things, but also really to go and explore new things. Like I think we've had a lot of fun exploring a whole bunch of additional statistics that you really can do just from having a bit of fun without necessarily being the official collaboration approved analysis. This is certainly not collaboration approved. So what do we actually do? Well, the unofficial data set we have is essentially a combination of, I think now, 6 different statistics. We have the power spectra that DESI use. We also add bispectra up to K of 0.16, if that is interesting to you. We also add baryon acoustic oscillations. We also do things which make us relevant to this workshop. We now do cross-correlations. So we cross-correlate with CMB lensing, with spectroscopic galaxies, and also photometric galaxies. And that's Mark Mouse did a lot of the real heavy lifting for this set. And also some cross-correlations between photometric galaxies, in particular looking at the bits not included in the main DESI footprint, kind of minimize overlap. So, same slide again. Okay, so of course we do this, and then we have to make a whole bunch of choices, and there's a bunch of challenges along the way. A couple of things that I should point out about this analysis that are a little bit different to DESI's. We use a slightly different estimator to measure everything, called Polybin 3D. It essentially measures all these statistics for you with a lot of FFTs and a lot of compute. As I said, we throw in some extra data. In particular, we're adding the bispectra always. We also go to slightly higher order in theory. We do everything at next to leading order, or 1 loop, which for the power spectra is already what everyone does. For the bispectra, it's a little more challenging. I think the theory model has like 47 free parameters per statistic. We do all the covariances analytically, we care about systematics, and we add some priors, and a lot of fun stuff like that. And there's probably 50, 60 pages of technical details in the appendices of the paper, which I'm absolutely not going to bore you with. Instead, let me just flash a couple of results. And once again, absolutely go to the papers if you want to see more information about any of these results. Here, I just want to show you it's cool. So this is kind of a nice plot of constraints on lambda CDM from all of these different data sets we've been thinking about. And the interesting plot is really this one on the right, sigma rate. What you can see is you start off with a power spectrum, and you keep adding more and more and more data. And the point is, every time you add more data, you get better constraints. And they're generally sort of consistent. We end up learning quite a bit extra from correlations with CMB lensing, consistent with the talks we had at the beginning of the week. Quite a bit from photometric data, even once we go up to next to leading order in bispectra, we get quite a bit more information. Particularly in this case, I think our omega matter got about 15% better. Overall, we get some nice constraints on lambda CDM. The parameters all have some numbers which sort of vaguely agree with Planck and pretty much everyone else except supernovae. We still have a big H0 tension, but no S8 tension, which is nice. Of course, for me, I'm getting more excited these days about things which are not lambda CDM. So just to tell you about a couple of things beyond the standard paradigm. One fun one is curvature. It turns out this kind of full-shape data can really tell you a lot about curvature. This little black curve here is the constraint on the universe's curvature just from BAO. And if you add the power spectra, it switches to the blue one, then add the bispectra, it gets quite a bit stronger still, which is nice. I mean, if you add the CMB, these things become absolutely tiny, and at that point you're actually not dominated by full shape, but it's a nice independent cross-check. Of course, you can also do dark energy. You can do dynamical dark energy. We have some kind of fun results here. Once you add this full shape information, your constraints tighten quite a bit. We actually find some evidence for dynamical dark energy, even without any supernovae at all. It's about without the CMB at all, it's about 2.6 sigma. Constraints get a bit better when we add more stuff. Once we chuck in the kitchen sink, including lensing, etc., we get about 18% better figure of merits. So this ellipse the green ellipse is slightly smaller than the blue ellipse, I think, something like that, which is nice. And then we can also do neutrinos. This is also a fun one. We get some pretty strong constraints on neutrinos now. In fact, we found that once we chucked in all this additional information, the constraints improved by 10 to 20%. In particular, the full shape, comparing full shape to just BAO constraints, we get 25% stronger constraints on neutrino masses. We can also do this beyond lambda CDM. So the constraints within dynamical dark energy cosmology is kind of interesting. We're now at the point we can formally rule out the inverted hierarchy at 2 sigma, regardless of the cosmological model. So within both lambda CDM and beyond, these contours are in pretty decent tension now with this first dotted line, like inverted hierarchy neutrinos. Okay, so I think I probably have 1 minute left, maybe, optimistically. So I'll tell you about the last fun thing we've been doing, which is inflation. So we can constrain primordial non-Gaussianity with this data set. And in particular, because we're now using bispectra, we can constrain a whole host of different interesting inflationary models. So we can do sort of all your favorite FNLs. We can do FNL equilateral, FNL orthogonal, and FNL local. And this massive gray contour here is what happens if you do it from the power spectrum. You can see the bispectra is like everything you need to do equilateral and orthogonal. For local, it's a bit different. Scale-dependent bias is kind of the big game in town. And we get out some pretty nifty constraints on FNL local. I think the kind of trademark one we have here is DESI, all of the DESI samples plus power spectra plus bispectra. We get up to about plus or minus 7, which is, from my point of view, pretty exciting because we're now got to the point where large-scale structure is almost as constraining as the CMB. Indeed, if you add everything together, you can get even stronger constraints than the CMB. So I think now the best constraint we have from data on FNL is now plus or minus 4. It's not a huge improvement from plus or minus 5, but it does mean we're getting into the point that we're soon going to be in with SPHERICS and a whole bunch of other exciting probes when it really becomes the best probe of the early universe. So I think my 10 minutes is almost certainly past. So let me conclude by saying we redid DESI. It was fun. We found a lot of stuff. And if you have more things we should look at, let me know and we can happily look at them. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Oliver, for a very nice talk and a heroic analysis. Yeah, quick questions for Oliver.
So I guess you mentioned the one-loop bispectrum model has, like a very large number of parameters, 40-something. Yep. Are you guys using some sort of prior, or is this fully self-calibrated and then marginalized over?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly uninformative priors on all of them, based on sort of general guesswork of how much we expect the parameters to, what sort of value we expect, times by a factor of a few to make sure we're pretty conservative. It doesn't seem to be too sensitive to the choice. I should say this model has been validated on some pretty huge simulations before, so we have some idea it should be working.
I guess I'm just asking because, there have been other papers where people even try to do just a power spectrum only extended bias model, yep. And depending on the priors, the projection effects get pretty severe, so I could imagine with 44 this is...
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think this is something we certainly found with these analyses, is that you do have to be very careful about what parameters you put priors on. So hidden in the weeds here, we redefine every parameter to have some nonlinear combination of sigma 8 and Alka-Opchinski effects, which actually minimizes a lot of these effects. And one thing you have to do is test. So like you inject fake data and check that you actually recover the right thing. That seems to pass, at least for these data cuts.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice result, obviously. And did the lack of mock limit your analysis? I mean, it made it more complicated, but it limit ultimately the power of your analysis.
There are definitely things which would be great to test more with mocks. I think in particular some of these like off-diagonal covariances and covariance things coming in at second order, like between power spectra and bispectra. We have various arguments for why most of these constraints shouldn't really be affected much. And I think particularly now with a very short noise dominated sample, which DR1 is, but DR2 and beyond less so, it means it's probably not a huge effect, and the tests we've done confirm that. For the future, it'll be great. I mean, mocks are certainly extremely useful for this, and analytic things will take you so far, but at the end of the day, it's needed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you use any kind of blinding scheme to trying to avoid confirmation bias to match the official results?
Yeah, not really. I think it's a little harder to blind once the data has already been announced by DESI. I think, yeah, this is something that maybe we should consider more in the future, but for now, it's all been entirely unblind.
Yeah, reading your paper, I remember the BAO and the full, you know what I'm going to ask?
This one?
Yeah, covariance, you, I guess, did not take the off-diagonal contributions and so on, so can you comment like whether if that's important or not?
Yeah, I thought I was going to get this question. So I refer you to Appendix D of version 3 of the paper, which is essentially, yeah, this is a good point. Like we ignore the correlations between the power spectra and the BEO, with the limitation that the BEO we're using is from DESI DR2 and the power spectra for DR1. That effect alone massively suppresses the correlation, as well as the fact that the cross correlations are actually empirically quite weak. I mean, you can test this. This is a test when you put in a model for what you expect this cross correlation to look like, calibrated actually on simulations and rescaled, and it doesn't shift things very much. It's like about 0.2, 0.3 sigma. You can also do everything when you actually include this cross correlation all within DR1. The results are a little bit worse because you just have DR1 now, but you can do this. There's another long appendix detailing this. It works. It's nothing crazy, but it can be done analytically self-consistently.
I'm really amazed about the projection effects issue. So just so I understand it, there's more than 40 parameters that you have pretty weak priors.
Yep.
And could you say a little more about how you handle projection effects?
Yeah, I mean, I would think of a lot of these priors as essentially just creating a very smooth covariant, a smooth additional source of covariance, which is correlated between a lot of the bins, because most of these just essentially change the small scale bispectrum in a very correlated manner. So there's really not 43 independent things that can happen. It's really like a few. But I think you can see these effects even just with a linear bias. So something like, I mean, DESI, I think Mark Mouse was advocating for this pretty heavily, and I guess Simone as well. If you sample B1 and sigma 8, you can essentially have some significant problems, but if you sample sigma 8 and B1 times sigma 8, your projection effects are massively reduced. We go ahead and do this for all the higher order ones as well. So you sample B2 sigma 8 squared, and essentially sampling the combinations of parameters which your data is actually able to constrain. The proof in the pudding is really check that it works. Take a noiseless theory model and check that you recover it to 1 within a sigma or so. And that to us is the consistency check that proves that it's not a big effect right now.
Just a curiosity. So you said that the power spectrum and the BAO have negligible covariance, well, not too big covariance. Is this because the two are sensitive to two different scales, like K equivalents and sound horizon, which are not directly connected to each other?
Yeah, I mean, in part, right? So a lot of the bispectrum data we make use of really comes from very low scales. So often we're cutting the bispectra at K less than 0.1. We do now extend to a bit higher, but a lot of the information is still very large scales, which doesn't even have any BEO information because we haven't even got to the BEO peak. So at that point, it's really probing a very different part of the cosmology, which helps.
Okay. In the interest of time, we should postpone further questions to the break. And let's thank Oliver again. Thanks so much.